Hi, everyone. Welcome in. We're going to get started here in just a couple minutes while we wait for some people to filter in. Would love to hear where everyone's zooming in from in the chat. I'm in Seattle, and it's surprisingly nice right now, which is shocking if you all have ever been to Seattle. Um, and Rebecca, you're in California.
I'm in Palo Alto area. It's surprisingly not that nice, but a little bit rainy, but that's okay.
We switched. Oh, Norway. Wow. Florida. Exciting. Yeah, so we'll just give everyone here like one more minute to join. But thank you all so much for joining on the webinar today. Really excited about the conversation we're about to have. I We will be able to send out copies of the webinar if you want to share with your colleagues or anything like that afterwards. We will send that information along. Oh, Michigan, Ottawa, Puerto Rico. Northern California has snow. Wow. We got people from all over. I love that. Kentucky. Okay, well, I'm sure people will keep on joining in, but I would love to just hop right in and get started. So, once again, hi everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name's Megan. I am on the sales team here at Reed, and we're here to talk about something you all experience every single day, meetings, and how AI is fundamentally shaping them. I have an amazing guest here today to help unpack what's happening and how to improve our meetings. Rebecca is a researcher and author who studies power dynamics, collaboration, and what really happens inside meetings beneath the surface. She's held leadership roles at Asana and Dropbox and has spent years examining how meetings influence equity, performance, and organizational culture. She's just published her first book called Your Best Meeting Ever, and everyone who attends the webinar today and lives in the US will get a free copy. I'm so excited to talk to her, learn from her, and hear what she has to say about meetings and the impact of AI and how we all interact and collaborate. I have a handful of questions ready to go, and then we'll open it up for you all to ask questions as well. I have a colleague attending who will help moderate the chat for me, so simply throw your questions into the chat throughout our conversation, and we'll get to as many as we can. Without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce Rebecca Hines. Rebecca, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you everyone for joining. I'm really looking forward to the conversation.
Same. I guess we'll just hop right in. You've spent years studying how meetings function, especially when it comes to power and participation. So I'd love to just start by asking you how AI is changing meetings across the board.
Hmm. I think what we're seeing in meetings as well as outside of meetings is surprisingly, AI does not magically transform any part of our work and any part of our culture, any part of our work practices. What it is much more likely to do is amplify what already exists. And I think this is particularly true with meetings where we all have certain meeting cultures within our organizations. Some are much more intentional than others. And for those organizations where there is an intentional meeting culture, meetings are used as strategic tools and products, as I like to refer to them. AI gives us an opportunity to make those meetings even more intentional, from everything from scheduling to advising in the meeting to actually participating. On the flip side, in cultures where there isn't a healthy meeting culture, meetings are used mainly as a lazy default. If we have a problem, if there's uncertainty, we schedule a meeting. AI in many ways gives us more opportunity to cognitively offload the things that we should be doing as humans to the AI. And that's where I worry about a lot. If we don't have a fundamentally good understanding of what justifies a meeting, what should be a meeting in our organization, AI is not going to fix that. Broadly, I think what we're seeing is there are three different types of roles for AI to play in meetings. One is automation. So we know that all of our meetings have a lot of administrative drudgery that we need to do in order for the meeting to function, from everything from scheduling to transcriptions to action items. That becomes incredibly exciting when it comes to the role for AI to play. The second role is advising. So, this is where Read comes in as a very powerful tool using AI to advise us on how to conduct better meetings, both within the meeting as well as after and even before. The third camp, so we talked about automation, advising, and then there's this very interesting role for AI to play as an active participant in the meeting. This is both exciting and a little bit nerve-wracking when it comes to showing up as a specific participant. So there are lots of exciting roles AI can play in terms of moderating our meetings, helping to moderate, playing a devil's advocate, for example, or showing up and representing humans in the meeting, which is also where I worry a little bit, because if we're designing meetings truly to be intentional and as a last resort rather than a lazy default, then there should be, in my view, very few instances where we can fully offload that participation in the meeting to AI.
Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense. And I think like that can kind of lead us into some measurement points around meetings. So, since AI is changing meetings so much, we should probably rethink how we evaluate them. So, could you take me through, all of us through, some of the most salient insights you have about how meetings with AI are better or different than when AI is not present in the meeting?
And I think that this relates to this idea of, AI is not deterministic. It's not magically going to change any part of our meeting design fundamentally. What it will do is amplify what already exists. And it really is about how we enact it. And I think if we take something like AI transcription or AI note taking, that's a great example because we can either enact the technology in a way that we are being able to be more present as humans, and rely on those notes for the things that we are actively engaging in within the meeting, or which we're also seeing, we can use that transcription as sort of a scapegoat and a crutch in many ways and avoid fully participating in the meeting, multitasking, because we have that safeguard of the transcription. And so thinking about, how are we enacting this technology? How are we clarifying to employees what is the role of AI to play in meetings and what is it in service of? Is it in service of efficiency? Is it in service of better engagement, human to human? Is it in service of better decision making? Is really important.
Definitely. And I think it just shows like AI can really improve our processes, but we just have to take a lot into consideration. I know that I hear a lot that sometimes people think it can just be like noise added onto a call. So, what's your best piece of advice for using AI in meetings so it improves outcomes instead of just adding noise?
Mm. It's such a great question, such an important one. I think, one aspect of this that is really exciting is in many organizations, meetings operate quite siloed in the sense of what happens in the meeting doesn't necessarily connect to the bigger organizational picture. And, a lot of the research points to the fact that we often blame meetings for everything that's wrong with work, but usually they're a symptom of a bigger problem, and that is a broken communication system. And in particular, when, your Slack isn't connected to your Zoom, isn't connected to your email, there's no information exchange happening across these platforms, it's hard to optimize our meetings in the most effective way. AI gives us an opportunity to connect all these different platforms in a way where information exchange isn't just being shared. So you have more context before the meeting. Those action items that are voiced in the meeting are communicating to the rest of the organizational system. but it also helps you understand better those outcomes. And if we have a clear sense of what are our business KPIs, we can start to more reliably and accurately look at, okay, are these meetings, is the effectiveness of the meeting actually contributing to these outcomes? What does it look like on a meeting heavy day versus a meeting light day? How do our meeting dynamics influence these specific outcomes? That becomes really exciting as well.
Yeah. And in like your research, where have you seen teams misuse AI the most right now?
A couple aspects. One, fundamentally, again, using the AI tool as an excuse or a crutch to not show up and physically participate. And, part of this, the danger of this is I often see individuals and teams will opt out of a meeting, knowing that the transcript exists. And then because we're so busy, because we're overwhelmed, because we have so many priorities, you never go back to the transcript. And that becomes, detrimental because our intent doesn't line up with, what actually happens. And so I think, the teams that are getting this moment right inside, outside of meetings are thinking about how can I use AI as a tool to design better meetings and use meetings to advance our business outcomes. The measurement piece around this is very exciting because historically, many organizations have not measured meeting effectiveness, have not measured collaboration. We know that as knowledge workers, as desk workers, we spend 85 to 90% of our time collaborating. Much of that time is in meetings. And to not measure that is understandable because it is complex to measure, particularly in a pre-AI world. But it's also a massive missed opportunity. And it's the number one, in my opinion, the number one biggest opportunity organizations have with AI is moving beyond the individual productivity layer and thinking about, okay, how can I design better collaborative rhythms and workflows and norms that are truly advancing team and organizational outcomes?
Yeah, that's super insightful. And I'm sure that we have, a wide range of people here today that are maybe feel like they have their meetings down great, but also just like some that are just getting started with their meetings and trying to improve them. So if someone is just getting started and wants to improve their meetings, what's the number one thing that you think they should focus on getting right first?
There are lots of different pillars. I think fundamentally the easiest, lowest hanging fruit for organizations and individuals and team leads is what deserves to be a meeting in our organization, in our team, for me as an individual. In my book, I walk through a framework called the 4D CEO test, which is essentially a two-part test to decide whether a meeting needs to exist in our organization. The first test, which is the 4Ds, a meeting should really only exist if the purpose is to decide, debate, discuss, or develop yourself or your team. And even that first test, you'll notice what's not on that list. Status updates, not on the list. Boss briefings, not on the list. Even something like brainstorming, overwhelming. Overwhelmingly, there's academic research to show we actually don't brainstorm most effectively collectively. It's actually much more effective for innovation, not just in terms of the quality of ideas, but also in terms of the quantity if we brainstorm independently and then come together. So brainstorm independently once we're deciding and discussing, which then crosses into the 4Ds, coming together in a meeting form, that gut check for employees in terms of, hey, we've scheduled this on the calendar. Is it information exchange? Is it a status update? Or is it really one of those 4Ds? it not only gives employees a lot of clarity, but it also gives them an opportunity to point to something tangible and, perceivably objective in pushing back on meetings that they don't think should be on the calendar. And that's one of the healthiest cultures organizations can cultivate around meetings is giving employees explicit permission to decline or not show up for meetings that they don't think they're contributing value to or reaping value from.
Yeah, I love to hear that. I know, like previously, I've definitely been in meetings before where I was like, I don't know if this is the best use of my time. Obviously, now at Reed, like we're very thoughtful about our
Mhm.
meetings, but I'm sure everyone has been in that instance as well. Well, since you started to bring up kind of some aspects of your book, I want to move away from AI entirely for a moment. So you just wrote your book on the best meeting ever. What's your number one tip for running an effective meeting that has nothing to do with technology?
So I see something in the chat, the law of 2 feet. I love this one. It's something I reference in the book. If employees don't feel they're contributing to meetings or reaping value, use your 2 feet or however you're able and walk out of the room. If we look at some of the great organizations of our time, they very much either explicitly or implicitly advocate for a rule like that. Everyone is a designer of better meetings. And when we think about the principles of the book, I think that's one of the most important ones in terms of we're all designers of better meetings, regardless of whether we're organizing the meeting. Another principle that I think is very important is the idea of user-centric design applied to meetings. So the premise of my book is meetings are a product. Meetings are the most important product in our entire organization. We all know that. They're where decisions get made, culture gets built or sometimes broken, alignment gets set, and yet they're also the least optimized. And what I've long found fascinating is there are two people who tend to leave meetings most satisfied. Take a moment. Who do you think leaves the meeting most satisfied? Maybe some guesses in the chat. There are two types of people.
I would love to see.
Those who are participating. Yeah, so that's one. The person who talks the most tends to leave the meeting more satisfied, and the leader of the meeting. And I think this speaks to the importance and underscores the importance of, when we're designing a meeting, meetings are the most expensive form of collaboration in our organizations. When we're designing a meeting, we should be designing for the attendees in the room and treating their time as more important than our own as the meeting organizer. And I think that's a really healthy, intentional practice as we're designing meetings. Are we putting more thought in how other people are investing their time in the meeting? Or are we just thinking about what we need to say? That type of, cognitive leap, I think is a healthy one.
I love that. And I think that's such a powerful reminder. And just trying to be really insightful and considerate while you're planning these meetings. It's like AI might help, like we've discussed, but the fundamentals still matter within the meeting.
Mhm.
So I love that. So together, Rita and I worked with you on new research that explores how power shows up in meetings. Who speaks, who gets credit, who holds information. One surprising finding is that when meetings are transcribed by AI, women speak more based on representation. Why do you think simply knowing that the meeting is being captured changes that participation behavior?
It's such an important finding, and I think there are several important caveats associated with this research. One is we know that women in particular are contributing more relative to their presence in the meeting. What we don't know is how women would have participated in those same meetings had AI not been present. We don't know the counterfactual. That said, there are a host of different studies, decades really of academic studies to suggest that power dynamics are pervasive in meetings in our organizations broadly. And in general, men typically speak more and interrupt more in meetings. And so this early research, really is exciting in the sense of, it gives us some indication that AI might be playing a role in leveling the playing field and encouraging women to speak more in meetings. What I think is happening, and again, we can't claim causality and we don't know for sure, but what I expect is at least partially driving this, equality of participation is what's sometimes referred to as the Hawthorne effect. So there were these studies done in the 1920s and 1930s where researchers observed workers working in factories and found that, just being watched changed how productive they were because we all feel that, when we're being observed, we often will change our behavior because of that monitoring. And that becomes very exciting because if this is happening in meetings, it not only gives women more insight into, how they're participating relative to males, but also males more insight. And often I don't think these power dynamics are intentional. It's often that we don't have the data, we don't have the insight to actually understand the, voice dynamics, the participation dynamics in our meetings. What we know from academic research as well is equal airtime is one of the strongest predictors of team performance. And so we know that, our meeting dynamics are never going to be fully equal, but the more equal they are across many, many meetings and across many, many days and months, in general, we can assume that our team performance is going to be greater. And that is something that, I'm excited for more research to dig into and something that I'm very excited about in terms of this early research to suggest that AI might have, a significant role in encouraging greater participation in meetings.
Yeah, and that leads perfectly into my next question. So AI really is starting to move from passive capture to an active participant. It's no longer just listening, it's advising us, nudging, even contributing. So from a power dynamics perspective, what should leaders be mindful of as AI becomes more of a participant, not just this tool
Mm.
in our meetings?
This is really important. And I think being clear for your team, your organization, yourself in terms of what is the role that AI is playing. I've done some fascinating research over the years with my colleagues in terms of, you know, the mental models that employees are framing AI as, those matter deeply in terms of how they might or might not engage with it. And in particular, if people have a mental model of a tool versus a teammate, that changes how they interact with the technology. If we see it as strictly transactional, we're going to engage with it in different ways than if we truly see it as a colleague or a teammate. And so having that clarity, instilling the clarity in terms of, when do humans absolutely need to show up as full humans for the meeting, what is the role of AI to play is very, very important. And, you know, we still know that in most organizations, there is significant fear, significant uncertainty associated with the technology. Many individuals are inevitably going to be taken aback and turned off by anything that they're perceiving to be around surveillance or policing behavior. And I've long believed that the power of analytic tools, the power of AI is first and foremost to put that information in the hands of employees. And it's remarkable, when you put analytics into the hands of employees, when you give them more information in terms of how they're collaborating with their peers in a way that is absolutely not surveillance or policing behavior, but is meant at equipping them with more insights, that becomes very powerful. And I hope, more organizations will, recognize the importance of putting insights in the hands of employees as opposed to using it for surveillance or policing behaviors, because that's not the opportunity here, and it's not going to lead to the best outcomes for either the individual or the team or certainly the organization.
Yeah, I'd love to hear that. That is great advice. We've been very much focusing on the meetings, but I would love to zoom out to the bigger picture now. AI is changing all the time so quickly. So, 2 years from now, what role do you expect AI to play in most meetings? How will companies change their meetings and collaboration structures?
So predictions around AI are so difficult, and in particular, predictions past 6 months are nearly impossible. I think, it's reasonable to assume we will have much greater insight into how work is happening and how work can happen more effectively if we use the information and the insights from AI intentionally. So I do see a world where in the best organizations, there's going to be a significant sense of whether a meeting has been effective in real time in a way that we've never been able to, have that real time access before. I see a world in which, the meeting ecosystem is connected to the broader communication ecosystem in a really compelling way. I think, to think that Slack is connected to email is connected to your meeting system, that should all be the case for most organizations within the next 2 years. I think there's an exciting opportunity. I don't know when we'll see it, but an exciting opportunity to start to actually nudge people into better collaborative behaviors in meetings. So there was this study that came out a couple years ago. It was a group of Stanford and Berkeley researchers, and they essentially measured something that they called discursive diversity. So this was what how different or similar were the words that teammates used as they were collaborating? And what these researchers found was the highest performing teams, they actually flexed their language depending on the task at hand. So when they needed to be creative, they were using a lot of different types of words, a lot of different types of jargons and perspectives, and that makes sense. And then when they needed to coordinate and move work forward, their language started to converge. They needed to converge on the project, and their language matched that. And this is something that I'm very excited about. I don't know when or if we'll see it, but there's definitely opportunity for AI to actually nudge us in the right collaborative mindset and toward the right collaborative behaviors in and outside of meetings. And again, when we think about the sheer amount of time we spend collaborating, that becomes an opportunity, I think, that I hope is tapped into.
That's great. I love to hear your perspective on where you think AI is headed, especially in these meetings. One more question for me, and then we'll get to any of our viewers' questions. But if everyone listening made one small change to their meetings tomorrow, whether that's AI related or not, what would you hope that change is?
Intentionality, and often, taking that extra 30 seconds to decide, is this meeting really a meeting? Does it deserve to be on the calendar? If we're bringing AI into meetings, what is the role for AI to play? So often, as we've talked about, we use meetings as a lazy default, and that intentionality, thinking of your meetings as a product and something that is very, very expensive in terms of cost, time, and our sanity often, I think is something that we all can do a little bit more of.
I love that. Well, Rebecca, this has been such a thoughtful and such a great conversation. I know I've been asking all the questions, so I would love to open the floor to questions from any viewers. Go ahead and throw your questions in the chat, if we have any. I can definitely come up with more questions though if I need to. While we wait to see if anyone decides to type one out, I would love to know, while doing all of this research, while writing your book, what was the thing that surprised you most? Whether that's about meetings in general, AI in general.
It's surprising, and the reason why I have long been interested in meetings is, this is a practice that has largely remained unchanged in organizations for decades and decades. I actually start my book with a story of the Simple Sabotage Field Manual from World War II, which was essentially written by the precursor to the CIA, advising people to use meetings as acts of sabotage to sabotage the enemy. And it's funny, it's humorous, but it's also very unfortunate that, we spend so much time in meetings. They're so much a part of our organizations, and yet they've largely remained unchanged, and we know they're dysfunctional. And that, is deeply frustrating from a practitioner standpoint and an employee standpoint and a leader perspective. But from a researcher perspective, it's absolutely fascinating. And at the core of all of this are deep, deep-seated human behaviors, dating back to our tribal tendencies. We love to be part of a tribe. We love to speak face to face and synchronously. And so, it makes sense that our ingrained meeting habits are so difficult to change. But at the same time, the fact that we recognize how dysfunctional they are and still cling to the status quo is quite surprising.
Definitely. I'd like to ask one question from the viewers, and I think this is a great question. It comes up all the time in conversations I have. But many people are uncomfortable with AI taking notes due to confidentiality reasons. Is there a way to ease their minds, or is there a security measure for confidentiality?
It's so important. And this is why, yes, security and permissioning and, SSO, all of these safeguards are absolutely important. From an organizational standpoint, I believe the most important thing an organization can do from the get-go is give employees complete transparency and clarity in terms of when is AI playing a role, what is the role AI is playing, what is it capturing? What is the intent behind it? We see consistently that employees are much more likely to buy into a policy or a practice when they understand the why behind it. And I don't think in our organizations we do that enough. And employees naturally jump to the conclusion, understandably, that this is being used to police behavior or in a way that could, negatively impact them, as opposed to the reverse, which is what I believe is the opportunity here, is to improve our collaboration and allow us to be much more intentional about how we meet and how we spend this very expensive yet important collaboration time.
That is great advice. I love that. Well, I know we're at time, so I just want to say thank you so much, everyone, for your insightful questions. I think one of the big takeaways here is that meetings are ultimately human systems. AI is powerful, but like Rebecca mentioned, intention really does matter. And power dynamics don't disappear just because we introduce new tools, rather, they evolve. So, thank you for helping us think more critically and more intentionally about how we design meetings. Thank you so, so much for joining us today. We did throw in the chat for anyone to click on the link to make sure that you claim your free Best Meeting Ever book from Rebecca. If you have any questions, you can also follow up with to webinars at read.ai. But once again, Rebecca, thank you so much for joining us today. Everyone, all the viewers, thank you for joining us today. And I hope everyone has a great rest of your Wednesday.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Bye.